Live Fit Podcast, Episode 54. Let food be thy medicine to prevent headaches.
I felt pretty lost with, I hope I don't have to live with these for the rest of my life. When I would get one, it would be a 3-day event of severe pain, like someone put a coal into your head and it's just burning there, and I would wrap ice around my neck and my head and lock myself in the back room with total darkness because light and sound, and of course nausea was a huge issue of vomiting regularly for at least 24 hours, and it didn't lead to a real quality of life. So let our food be our medicine.
You're listening to the Live Fit Podcast with Glenn Johnson. Here, we'll talk about all things related to good health, fitness, food, fat loss, and the mind-body connection.
Yes, it's time once again for the Live Fit Podcast. I am your host, Glenn Johnson. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This is Episode 54. Let food be thy medicine to prevent migraines. My guest today is a woman named Vonnie, and I wanted to bring her on the show because she has suffered with headaches and migraines since she was an adolescent. She tried every kind of doctor and drug available and found that this was just not a realistic solution for her. But she didn't give up. I want her to tell you her story, what she did and how she did it, and how she now lives her life in peace and happiness with no more than 1, sometimes 2 migraines a year. Vonnie compares a headache to a migraine as a smart car could be compared to a freight train. And when I said this, she said, yeah, it actually feels like a freight train speeding through your head. And this does not sound like anything I would ever want to have. And believe me, I would do everything I could to prevent them as well. My guest today is not a doctor. She's not an author. She is not a research scientist. But what she is an expert on what it takes to prevent migraines in herself. She has done countless hours of research, talking with people, working with naturopaths and holistic physicians. She has tried and failed and learned and succeeded with preventing migraine headaches through a number of daily lifestyle actions and activities. I'm going to let Vonnie tell you her story because I find it really fascinating, but she's a private person, so I don't mention her last name. She's not trying to promote anything. She just wants to help other people find a solution to their headaches. She was a little bit hesitant to come on today, and I convinced her that she would be doing somebody a favor. I know there's somebody out there listening who suffers from severe headaches that could be relieved, maybe even eliminated by Vonnie's method. Without further ado, let's hear from Vonnie. Hi, Vonnie. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing really well, Glenn, and thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. I really appreciate you getting on the show. I know you were hesitant because you're not a doctor or a professor. You haven't written a book, and so you don't consider yourself an expert in this field, but you're a regular person, right?
I am a regular person. Yes, I am. And
you're a regular person who's been battling something that is really quite devastating.
Yes, it has. It started when I was a teenager, and I had a few headaches, which I now know were migraine. I didn't realize it at the time. And then when I got into my 20s with young children and a business that my husband and I had just bought and were attempting to get up and going, they became much more frequent, and probably due to a little bit of stress and some lack of sleep. I went to see my regular GP and said, I'm having headaches, and he's, okay, we'll put you on some pain meds. And I tried that for a year, but it more than likely masked and made it really like I didn't care so much about whether I had a headache or not, but it wasn't the best solution for someone with young children and a business to run. And
right.
So I went back to see him, and they did, of course, a scan to make sure I didn't have any, a brain tumor or anything. and kind of just left it, well, you have headaches. And I felt pretty lost with, I hope I don't have to live with these for the rest of my life.
Right.
As it, when I would get one, it would be a 3-day event of severe pain, like someone put a coal into your head and it's just burning there, and I would wrap ice around my neck and my head and lock myself in the back room with total darkness because light and sound, and of course nausea was a huge issue of vomiting regularly for at least 24 hours, and it didn't lead to a real quality of life, and so I was searching for what I could do, and went to just on my own. I went to a allergist because they said, well, maybe you're allergic to something, and nothing real definitive there. And eventually I went to a naturopath who did find out that I was very allergic to mushrooms as well as aged cheese, specifically Swiss cheese, which is really odd. I don't know why we get allergies. And I had sensitivities to a few other things, wheat and corn. And so, of course, I cut those out completely and experimented with other, cutting out dairy for a while, and that didn't seem to make a difference. And still was having the headaches. And so looking again, I went back to my GP, and he says, well, maybe we can refer you to somebody, and I ended up seeing head of neurology out at OHSU. And the day I showed up there, I, of course, was having a migraine headache and in tears, and he looked at me and he says, classic migraine headache, which generally is one-sided. It's either going to be on your left side or your right side. Your lights, flickering lights, perfumes. For me, it was also diesel, the smell of the diesel. And
wow.
Where I am, there's a lot of equipment that's being run, and so I kind of locked myself in the house. But he prescribed Imitrex, which at that time was just injectable, so it would be sub-Q in the leg. Mm-hmm. And I would get literally the shakes knowing that I'm coming up with a headache. I have to give myself a shot.
Wow.
And eventually they had a pill. The only caveat to that is when you have a pill, if you don't recognize the signs of your headache coming on early enough, if you take that pill and you vomit it up, it's not going to do you any good.
Right.
Yeah. So I also started exercising a lot more. I had one other health issue, which was a little bit of osteoarthritis in my knees. And when I had gone for help for that, they said, well, bicycling is the best because it's low impact. And so that was my first mode of transportation. I was like, oh boy, I get to ride a bicycle again. And so I do that daily now. I ride a bike daily, and I also do some hiking, a little bit of free weights because that's important for your bones. Mm-hmm. And just some yoga and some stretching. You learn to relax. You learn to take the day as it comes. And I am fortunate now to have probably a couple times a year I get a headache. And knowing what will precipitate that and knowing the symptoms of that, I generally, when I start to get a headache, will take like a half of an Anacin, and if in 40 minutes it doesn't knock it, I would know that this is going to be more serious, at which time I would take just a 25 milligram Imitrex, and generally it does the job, and I'm good to go, and it's wonderful.
Wow.
But it has been quite a journey of changing my diet to food that is not processed, so I'm eating a lot of fruits and veg, and I do eat meat. It's grass-fed, and we also have venison, and chicken and fish, and so it's things that aren't processed, and it has helped me tremendously. I just feel more alive, and I feel actually better than I did probably 20 years ago. So I'm really happy with the slow process of investigation, and it's probably different for everyone, what their triggers are and maybe what their food allergies are if they have them. So it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, it sounds like a really, well, interesting is a nice way to put it. When you describe the migraines, and I've heard that before of how bad they are. I'm fortunate enough to never have experienced it, but the 2, 3, maybe 4 days laying in a darkened room, trying to, flinching at every sound and beam of light, and keeping ice on you, that sounds like a really, really horrible way to live. And when I hear what that's like, and for people who get those often, I excuse me for being bleak here, but what's the motivator to stay alive, really? I mean, it sounds really horrible, but you apparently have found a way through it and found what triggers it, which is fantastic. How long did this take from, I don't know, the time you saw the first doctor until you got to the point where you felt like you really had control?
Well, it took me 2 years just to get actually to see the neurosurgeon who said, this is what you have. And then it took another probably 2 years for me to smooth out what worked best for me. And I just have to go back to the bleakness of it. There were actually times when my head hurt so bad, I literally thought I was going to die. I mean, I would have my husband come in and hold me because I didn't know if I was going to be there in the next moment or not.
My God.
And thinking, should I be going to the hospital at this point? And fortunately, I didn't need to go, but I do know people who have gone to the ER for a shot or something to help them get through.
Right.
And so I never enjoy hearing a person who says, "Oh my gosh, I have migraines," because unless you actually have one and have experienced it, the understanding of the pain the person goes through is kind of, unless you've experienced it, you're not going to be saying, "Oh yeah, I had I have those too," and you're like, "No, it's a migraine."
Yeah, very different thing. Very, 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 very different. It's the scale between an ant and a locomotive. I think.
Exactly, and that's honestly sometimes what it feels like running through your head. Yes.
Wow, I am so sorry. I wouldn't wish that on anybody that I know. Anybody.
Yes. No, nor would I. Thank you.
So you said it took you 2 years to see the neurologist. That means you called up to make an appointment, and then they couldn't get you in for 2 years?
Well, basically, it wasn't that I couldn't get in for 2 years. It was kind of, they didn't know what to do with me. And I'm not sure why, because it seems so cut and dried once they say you give them the symptoms. But it was like, well, we know you don't have a brain tumor, and we know you don't have allergies, and we don't really know what to do with you because you have headaches. I'm not real sure why somebody just didn't come out and say, well, you have migraine headaches. And I know it was early on around the time that I was seen by the neurologist that they actually had come out with the Imitrex where they could actually, give you something to help the headache. And to be honest with you, I don't know if up until then they actually had a medication that was specific for, a migraine, because they do have, maybe Tylenol migraine or something like that, but it's not the same class of medication. No,
not at all. Not at all.
Right. And so I'm not real sure why it took so long, or if they thought maybe I was, here's a lady that has headaches, and a headache is invisible. So
right, you can't really understand.
Yeah, right. When you complain about it, it's like, well, it's all in her head, obviously, and but the symptoms of the vomiting and just sensitivity to light is real classic of what it can be, and so I would suggest anybody who has any symptoms like that to see somebody who can get them help probably a little bit sooner. And maybe it was because I didn't pursue it as hard as I should have, thinking, well, there's nothing they can do for me. But I don't give up easily.
Good.
So yeah, it was worth chasing, definitely. And I don't mind. I do have a restricted diet. I mean, as far as I put the restrictions on me because I do not want to eat the things that would, basically I see as poison that would cause the headache. And I function just fine. Life's good.
Now, I'm thinking of some of the people out there listening, and a lot of people are really, what's the word, resistant to give up certain foods that they really love. They just feel they have to have a particular food or two that I don't know, maybe it's part of their being, their personality, I'm not sure, but some people are really attached to certain foods. And I'm thinking there's probably some people out there who say, oh, just eat what you want and take an Imitrex. Would that work for you?
Oh, no, that would not work for me. I prefer to be medication-free, first of all.
Right.
And secondly, to me, it's really important to be eating right. And I gave up sugar, which basically is in the packaged foods. I still eat fruit. Well, there's, people could say, well, there's sugar in fruit. Well, it's a natural sugar, and yes, it's completely different. And you hit the nail on the head, Glenn, when you said a lot of people, it's easier for them to take a medication than change their diet.
Right.
But for me, it's easier to change my diet. It has other benefits as well. I mean, it didn't just, make me have less headaches. I have more strength and energy. It kind of took care of the little bit of osteoarthritis that I had in my knees. It's basically gone. I don't know, if that maybe it's just in my head, but it helped me in so many other ways. It would be, I think, beneficial, and it's a mindset that you say,
it is.
It will make me better, and it is great.
Well, I've heard the arthritis or joint pain many times being relieved from people who give up eating wheat.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's probably the source of that relief right there.
Right, because I gave up wheat, and I noticed that the corn, I might be able to have a few kernels of popcorn, once or twice a year. But if I was to eat that regularly, I would be back being headachy. And it's amazing how just, a small amount of something too often. And I do make a wicked sourdough bread, though. So it's a whole grain sourdough bread. So I
you can eat that.
Have that occasion. Yes, I make that myself. So it's one of my little treats that I have once in a while. I don't eat a lot of it, but
interesting.
That's just something I eat once in a while. So there are times, you think, yes, I can eat that, but when you have a reaction to it in a negative way, it's like, okay, no thank you. I don't want that anymore. And it becomes almost a fear. For me, it became a fear, like I don't want to touch that food again. And
I understand. So, if you can place a direct correlation between a certain food and your headache, that is going to be a huge deterrent. And my guess is that a lot of people are not as aware or are not able to tie those together as well as you have, and that's why they have not yet found a natural solution, and they end up taking the medication. So have you always... Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, and it is a time-consuming process of eliminating certain things until you reintroduce them, and then you realize that that's the issue. So it is a little bit of time-consuming, but it's okay. In the long run, it's worth it.
You are listening to the Live Fit podcast. You can find more information about this episode, plus Live Fit's weight loss, health improvement programs, and coaching at livefitpodcast.com. See you there.
Have you always been this in touch with your body, or have you developed that sense? Because the reason I say that is I work with a lot of people that they're just sort of separate. Their head and brain is completely separate from their body, and it's almost like a remote control, or maybe even some people are even more connected to their car than they are their own body. Have you always had this close connection? Were you an athlete when you were younger?
I was actually. In fact, that's how I got some of my osteoarthritis was from a sports injury. And probably not as a real youngster, but I was fortunate enough to have a mother who, canned food and grew a garden, and so I ate well early on as a youngster, and then probably as a teenager I got more into the junk food, and of course. It didn't be as healthy as I should have been, but I've been for the last 30 years. I've been pretty in tune with what makes me feel good, and the connection between eating right and having energy to do the things you want to do.
So you've been eating this way for about 30 years, you're saying?
I have.
Well, you definitely nailed it. How often do you get headaches now? Let's say migraines. How often?
Possibly 2 to 3 times a year. So they're less and less and less, and I'm hoping I outgrow them completely. And so 2 to 3 times a year, I can put up with that. I don't want to, but I will.
That's great. I think that's wonderful. Are they as bad as they once were? Or are you still in a cave for 3 days?
No. Most of the time, when if I have to take some medication for it, I can control it from the onset. In the last 2 years, I remember having one of being in a cave for a week, or it's not a week, but just a day. It was, but that was a circumstance of probably extreme stress because my father-in-law had died and my son was heading off to Afghanistan, and I think I just pretty stressed out over it. So unfortunately, I didn't give him a very good goodbye.
Oh, that's too bad. But he came back and everything's okay?
He came back and he's wonderful, yes.
Fantastic. That's good to hear. If I'm hearing you right, when you do have a migraine now, you can pinpoint it to something that didn't go quite as planned. So either you let the stress build up or you ate something you shouldn't have. Is that correct? Or do they ever come about, you have no idea why? Rarely does it come about as I don't know why, because one of the things I neglected to mention is, and it's very, very important to me, is that I get an adequate amount of sleep. Which yes.
is for me about 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep a night. And so sometimes if I stay out too late, and sometimes it can be a combination of the three, staying up too long, not getting the sleep I need, some extra stress, and eating something I probably shouldn't have. And sometimes that happens, and I have tried to eliminate it, is any type of sauce that's in a package, which I don't use anyway, but if I go to, a potluck or a wedding, and, they have all these wonderful foods here, and if I accidentally take a mouthful of something I shouldn't have, I will know it. And so I migrate toward the fresh fruit, the veg, and I stay, even the processed meats, the nitrates in them and things. I have a very sensitive system, I think. And so just knowing that, I stay away from them. But like you say, sometimes there's a slip-up.
Which leads me to my next question. It must make travel and eating out and going to events, like you just said, weddings and vacations, very difficult.
Well, I plan ahead is what I do. If I'm traveling, and I actually just got back from a week in Ireland, which I was thrilled over, I I pack food to start with. I always make sure that I have, enough packed for a day in case, the plane's delayed or something like that. And it's just a matter of selection. There's always things available to eat. It's just being aware of which ones you can. And, there's many times you can go to the grocery store and just pick up some apples and cheese, and I just have to make sure it's the right kind.
Soft cheese.
So, and so it's a matter of planning, and because I wouldn't, I travel a lot, more than I used to, in fact, and even. And there has been times when I have been on vacation and I have gotten a migraine, and it probably is more due to the lack of sleep. Because if you're, going overseas, obviously that's a sleep deprivation there. And so in my mind, I know it can happen. So you prepare as much as you can.
Right. So what would be some foods that you would take with you? So you just flew to and from Ireland. What did you take with you on the plane?
Okay. I took several apples, actually. I took a little bag of blueberries. I took walnuts and almonds. I actually packed, and this sounds probably kind of silly, but I put some oats, just regular oats, in with some seeds, chia seeds, and some hemp seeds, because that's some good protein. And at any airport, you can buy yogurt, so you just mix that with yogurt and eat it.
Nice.
I'm not real. I don't do a lot of like the little nutrition bars or anything like that. Most of it is just stuff I kind of toss together. And so I carry that with me. And actually on the plane, if I didn't have any yogurt with the oats, I could just ask for a cup of hot water and dump it on and have like a little hot cereal. I don't count on the airline food as something that I'm going to be eating. A lot of it, they can bring me some, and I usually order a special meal because you can do that.
Right.
And so it's just planning is the biggest thing. And so then on the return, I bought some cheese, and you have a harder time coming back through customs with any fruit and veg. So
True. But
if
you're in Ireland, there's lots of good cheeses there, especially goat cheese.
There's excellent cheese in Ireland.
Sheep cheese.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I was going to ask about the yogurt. It's probably pretty difficult to find yogurt that's not full of a bunch of sugar. Any kind of sweet yogurt. If you get anything other than plain yogurt, which I find very difficult to locate in the small single serving packs, especially at a place like an airport. It's in a grocery store. Sometimes you can get it like that, but the big ones are easy to find in grocery stores. But small convenience areas, it's tough. Because I don't like those yogurts that are full of jelly, and they're just way too sweet. I might as well eat a candy bar.
Right, I agree with you, Glenn. It was difficult. It depends on the airport. There have been times when I have had no issues at all just to find, and a lot of times what it is, it's the yogurt on the bottom, and then they have in a separate little cup the granola on the top, which I throw away because it's full of sugar.
True.
And then just the bottom part of the yogurt is the Greek yogurt, unflavored or natural, because I agree with you, the most of the yogurts you find are sugar-filled, and I don't eat those. And I did have a hard time finding one because I flew through Atlanta. But in Ireland, they have, that's all they. I'm not going to say that's all they have is the regular yogurt, but it's much more readily available there than. And actually, Portland Airport has a pretty good selection of the non-flavored, unsweetened.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah, there's a couple little stands.
That's good to know. That's really good to know. I don't travel very often, so I'm not as up on the foods that are available in airports, but I know that it's been easier lately to find healthy foods, but I don't have the restrictions that you do for the reason that you do, but I still like to eat like you do. In fact, while you're telling me everything you can and cannot eat, I'm thinking everybody should eat like you. I think everybody would be a lot healthier if they did eat like you. And imagine all the issues and ailments and sicknesses and pains that would be eliminated, and they probably aren't even aware. They've just had them for so long, they think, oh, that's just the way it is, or maybe they pop pills to get rid of these pains, whether it's headache or knee pain or whatnot, when all they really need to do is eliminate a certain food or a certain compound or chemical that's in some foods that they're eating. I think it's great.
Right. That's a very good point, Glenn, because, and I think even some of the age-related diseases, people look at and say, well, I'm just getting old. Well, no, you probably need to change your diet. And you know, so I think that would be something for anybody who has anything that they think possibly could be helped with food to investigate that.
Well, and I can hear the argument already for the what you just said. When someone's getting old, they think, oh, this is just the natural course of things, and you would suggest changing their diet, and their argument would be, but I've always eaten this. But as I'm sure you're aware, that you can become sensitive to certain foods. The more you have them, maybe you just can't tolerate it anymore.
It's a ongoing process. My investigations probably won't stop until the day I die, because there's always something that a person can learn about, you know, what you're eating, and there's also new advances in how they diagnose things, and they have really just come out with, well, maybe migraines are a brain disorder. So I'm thinking, where do we go with that?
Well, I guess you could say, yes, they are a brain disorder, but yeah, where do you go with that, and what exactly does that mean? Because something's causing it. Something's not right, because not everybody has migraines. It's not a normal way to be. So something's wrong somewhere. And since the pain is in the head, the chances are that it's up there somewhere. But I am no expert, so I can't further this part of the conversation anymore. But what I would like to ask is any suggestions for my listeners out there who have migraines, or maybe just have frequent headaches or bad headaches, maybe not to the extent of a migraine, but what would you suggest they do first to try to figure out what they can do about it with their, you know, I'm thinking of nutrition, of course, not necessarily doctors or drugs.
Right. The first, well, I always suggest that if you're hunting for a reason for something, is if you were to do this on your own, is to eliminate a food group. Say, okay, I'm going to eliminate wheat, because that, you know, seems to be the thing now with. So eliminate that and see if it makes a difference in how you feel. But you're going to have to do it for, you know, a couple of weeks for at least to feel any benefit from them. And it's also difficult because sometimes the self-diagnosis is, you know, it can be accurate or not accurate. So it's pretty much a trial and error thing. And to, like I said, you know, some people are allergic to strawberries or seafood, and generally they know it. Though, I mean, if they're really allergic, they will, you know, go into anaphylactic shock.
You're right in extreme cases. But if they're just sensitive to it, like which it sounds like you are with everything but mushrooms.
And cheese, right?
And cheese. Then it's not as an extreme of a reaction, but you know, a headache coming on a few hours later is, you know, it's still worth looking into.
Right, and so that's what I would suggest is if you basically would need to write down what you're eating, and when you get a headache, look back at those things and, okay, so maybe this is what I'll cut out, and see if that helps. And depending on the frequency of the headache, you know, if you had it daily, then if you cut it out in a week's time, you should be able to tell. But, you know, there again, I'm no expert on it. Right.
You know what works for you, though, or what did work and what continues to work. And as you said, it's a continual discovery process because you still get headaches now and then. So they were chances are triggered by something. Well, okay, not chances are. They were triggered by something. And whether it's food or stimulus related, you may not be able to tell, but you're constantly seeking it out.
Right. Yes.
Are you working with any physicians on this?
No, I am not currently.
Okay, but you did for a while, and see, the naturopath led you in the direction of allergens and sensitivities?
Right. And actually that was probably my biggest help for me to go forward on my own, because she was extremely helpful in being able to tell me that, okay, these things you are allergic to, and these things you have sensitivities to. And so that was the biggest step for me in being able to then discover on my own, like I said, through trial and error, what worked.
Right. Well, that's fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this with us, Vonnie. I think you will definitely help shed some light on some issues people are having. I really hope that they follow your advice and take the natural path first. Maybe they can eliminate all medication. Maybe they never have to go to that extreme. And, because there's no medication that is really adverse effect free. They do some harm in one way or another. Aspirin will eat a hole in your stomach, and Tylenol can damage your liver. And so even these over-the-counter drugs, if taken in excess, which if you have a headache every day, you take aspirin every day, that's enough to give you an ulcer.
Right, exactly. So let our food be our medicine.
Exactly. So anyways, once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you sharing this. I love talking with you. It was an honor, and I love hearing that somebody has really found a way and proven that food can be your medicine, and you don't need to suffer. You just need to plan ahead. It's as simple as that.
Exactly, and thank you, Glenn.
And thank you again, Vonnie. I know it was tough for you to come out and speak to all of us about it because you don't feel that you're an authority on the subject, but I think you just proved to everybody that you certainly are, at least with yourself. But if you think about it, what she said is not radical. Eating clean, wholesome, healthy foods, that's not radical. She has some allergies, but other than that, if everybody ate like her, we would all be much, much, much better off. Think of all the aches and pains that you normally feel. Maybe you're not attributing it to your diet. Think of the headaches that you get from time to time. Maybe it's caused by your diet. Maybe your lethargy or other issues that you just don't really recognize as being caused by the foods you're eating. Maybe they are. So we can all learn something from Vonnie. If we ate like Vonnie, I think we'd all be much more healthy and happy. So thank you, Vonnie. I do sincerely appreciate you coming on the show and telling us about it. If you enjoyed the show, which I'm presuming you did since you're still listening, please, please, please go on to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or wherever you're listening to it and leave a rating and a review. But most importantly, subscribe. That way you will get new episodes in your inbox on whatever your podcast catcher is every time it comes out. I shoot for one every week or 2 weeks, and you will have a new episode coming up very, very soon. Thank you all for listening and sticking with me to the end. Have a good one. Bye-bye.